Hello, you're watching Euronews now, and here are the latest headlines. A renewal of hope in the fight against COVID. The European Medicines Agency declares booster shots restore some protection against Omicron, but it hasn't ruled out possible tweaks to vaccines in the future. The World Health Organization tells Euronews it's still too early to know how severe Omicron is, but says the majority of people who've died with the variant so far were unvaccinated. And no liftoff. The highly anticipated launch of the James Webb Space Telescope faces yet another delay.
The EU's drug regulator has warned the COVID-19 situation across Europe remains extremely worrying due to the high rates of transmission. But the EMA's director stressed there was still no evidence as yet to suggest tweaks to current vaccines were needed to tackle Omicron.
Now, let me stress, there's no answer yet on whether we will need an adapted vaccine with a different composition to tackle this or any other emerging variant. We need to see more data on the impact of the variant on the effectiveness of the approved vaccines.
The EMA head also emphasised the importance of boosters.
We have more tools now than we've ever had before. We are ready for any changes that might need to happen to address the Omicron variant. And increasing vaccination now, both of primary series and boosters, will help prevent severe disease and death.
The European Medicines Agency has so far approved 5 COVID-19 vaccines. Earlier this year, it issued guidance to drug makers in case they needed to adapt jabs. It's also sped up the evaluation process of vaccines to tackle the pandemic.
It was a long-awaited press conference. Italy's Prime Minister Mario Draghi started off by saying that the priority remains dealing with the pandemic and said that the Omicron variant opened up a new phase in the fight against COVID-19. He stressed the importance of COVID-19 vaccines and said that Italy has one of the highest vaccination rates in Europe, which is crucial to help the economy grow. He said, in fact, Italy's economy is expected to grow by around 6% only this year. And he also touched on Italy's so-called National Resilience and Relaunch Plan and on the progress of Italy's investment plan. He also confirmed that all 51 targets have now been reached by the government, which means that the country is ready to receive the EU post-pandemic recovery funds. Italy is expected to get the largest share of those funds. But when it comes to the political front, whether or not Mario Draghi will stay on as Prime Minister or will run for President, given that Sergio Mattarella is determined to avoid a second term when the election of a new President is expected to take place beginning of next year. Well, Mario Draghi didn't say much about his future intentions. He said that all the right conditions have been created, and by saying so clearly referred to the fact that a number of reforms have now been set in motion by his government, and regardless of who he is going to lead the country, that's what he said, well, it's crucial that the government is supported by a large majority as it has now. But whether or not Mario Draghi will stay on as Prime Minister or will run for President, his choice will have consequences both for Italy and Europe. Giorgio Orlandi, Euronews in Rome.
The WHO has warned that within weeks Omicron will be the dominant variant in most European countries. States across the EU are imposing new and different measures daily. Public festive celebrations have been largely cancelled amid the surge in infections. Experts recommend vaccination to help prevent the risk of reinfection.
We've seen potentially a 5-fold increase in the risk of being reinfected with Omicron as compared to the Delta variant that's also circulating. Secondly, we have seen that vaccines prevent severe disease, including for the Omicron variant.
In France, around 20% of all new coronavirus cases are now the Omicron variant, and in Spain it's around 50%. Mass testing is underway, but what should be done to slow the infection rate?
To bring the pandemic to an end, at least its most acute phase, it also requires us individually to continue to take those preventive actions that prevent infections. And in addition, it will also need governments to undertake policies to stabilize and interrupt transmission of COVID-19. That's through the use of other measures, widespread access to testing, contact tracing, early detection of cases, the implementation of some social measures, targeted measures in high-risk settings when transmission rates increase.
The hospitality sector is once again taking a big hit. And despite funds being channeled to industries in need, Omicron is casting a shadow over the world's economic recovery. At least one person has died and dozens more are missing after a landslide in a jade mine in northern Myanmar. Rescue operations are now underway to find survivors. Sources say 70 miners were digging for jade when the landslide hit and were swept into a lake. The incident happened just before dawn.
As COVID-19 continues to restrict travel plans for the holiday season, people in Moscow are being treated to a spectacular display of Christmas trees. This year's theme is based on cities around the world. Every new year, authorities in Moscow try to outdo the previous year, turning the city into a fairy tale extravaganza, a way to make up for last year's display that was toned down due to the pandemic.
It's the biggest lottery draw in the world, and it dates back to 1812. Spain's El Gordo Christmas sweepstake hands out 2.3 billion euros nationwide, with a top prize of 400,000 euros for an individual winning ticket. For more on this, I'm joined by our very own Manu Taradios. So Manu, can you bring us up to speed with the tradition of this huge lottery? At 20 euros a ticket, it doesn't come cheap.
Buenos dias, good morning. Well, we have to put it in context because it's a single ticket, but you have several tickets per number. So you can buy 2 or 3 tickets of the same number and earn more money. But it's made in a way that it's a spread in Spain because, you know, maybe the price is not that big, but there are several things. First of all, you usually do not play it alone. You buy your tickets, but you play in groups, like, for example, with your friends of childhood. You can play with your family, with your teammates from your football team. So you buy tickets, you put it in common, and then you share the money you earn. It's also because if we do it in this way, with all these tickets, the biggest prizes can be sold in different places in Spain. So it's also part of the tradition that maybe it's won in Madrid, in Sevilla, in Barcelona, so people are checking what's happening. And the most important thing is the TV show we have with it. This lottery draw is made by a school. It's called San Ildefonso. Originally, it was an orphanage. Now it's not anymore, but part of it is a boarding school. And it's the kids. And they do it in a really specific way. They not only announce the numbers, but they do it somehow like singing. So, you know, for most of us, this sound on the TV, it was some part of background where we were children. You suddenly hear it's the top prize, so you rush to the TV to see what's the number. They also say what it was sold, so maybe it's your cousin's town, so you call him, hey, maybe you want some of this money. So for most of us, it's part of Christmas itself.
There's a bit of controversy surrounding it this year. Could you talk us through that?
Yeah, it's coming from the sellers. They're going on strike today because they want a bigger commission. Usually with this lottery, they get 4% of what they sell. In other lotteries, it's 6%, and they want a little bit more. So that means that all these lottery kiosks will be closed today, or most of them. So some of the people who won some prizes, especially the lowest ones, won't be able to collect it today. But most importantly, it's also that these places are usually a place of celebration. So they used to show with pride that they sold one of the biggest prizes. So people go there with champagne, celebrate. And probably this year, we might not have these images on TV.
Are you playing this year?
Yeah, of course. I'm doing it with 2 groups, actually, with my family, so with my brother and my parents, and also with my friends from childhood. A friend of mine bought my tickets because you cannot do it in France. I had to pay already for it because if not, might be bad luck. And speaking of traditions, you know, last year's we have a new one, which is with your smartphone. You take a picture of your ticket and you send it to the group with the people you are playing, so everybody knows which numbers are playing. So we'll see. Crossing my fingers, and let's see what happens this year.
Hungary said it will defy a ruling by the European Court of Justice in the latest saga between Prime Minister Viktor Orban and the EU. The judgment stated that Hungary had failed to uphold the right to apply for asylum and criminalized lawyers and activists who may help asylum seekers.
Consequently, following the decision by the Constitutional Court, the government looked into our options and we decided that we will not do anything to change the way the border is protected. That is, we will maintain exactly the order which we have implemented until now. Even if the European Court has instructed us to change it, we won't change it, and we aren't going to let anyone in.
The refusal to comply with the court may lead to heavy fines. Hungary shares borders with non-Schengen countries, Serbia, Romania and Croatia, and many people have sought to illegally enter the passport-free zone via Hungary. For its part, the European Commission has withheld 7.2 billion euros in pandemic recovery funds over corruption and judicial independence issues, with neither side set to compromise at this stage. Libya has postponed its presidential election, which was due to begin on Friday, in a major blow for efforts to politically stabilize the country. The collapse of the UN-backed electoral process was widely expected. The country was split between a government under General Khalifa Haftar in the east and a parallel UN-backed government in the west. In May, a government of national unity was set up under interim Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dababa. However, the government couldn't agree on the rules governing the elections, especially over who was actually allowed to run. Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, the late General Gaddafi's son, was banned from the race. No final candidates list was ever released. As a result, many of the key tenets of the election weren't in place.
There hasn't been a campaign period. Libyans have no idea who they're voting for, what their platforms are about, if they even have platforms. So there isn't, the conditions are not ripe for an electoral process of this magnitude.
10 years after the civil war that ousted General Gaddafi, Libya still doesn't have a unified leader. The Electoral Board has suggested January the 24th as a possible voting day. Before this, Libya must agree a way forward on the many disagreements it has.
The James Webb Telescope is expected to be launched into space this weekend, making it the biggest and the most powerful astronomical observatory ever to leave the planet. Its technological capacity means it can see things other telescopes can't, allowing it to peer back into the origins of the universe and potentially answering the age-old question, how did we get here after the Big Bang? It could even spot other forms of life.
The James Webb Space Telescope is NASA's next flagship space telescope. It is a collaboration between NASA and the European and Canadian space agencies. It will address a wide range of scientific topics, but first and foremost, it will detect the first galaxies in the universe, and it will characterize the atmospheres of exoplanets around other stars.
The telescope took more than 20 years to make and cost over 8 billion euros. It is a successor to the Hubble telescope and was named after the man who led NASA during the space exploration of the 60s. The most daunting part of the adventure now will be getting it to its destination in one piece.
Because the telescope is so large, it doesn't fit into the rocket that will launch it, so it has to be folded up. It has this giant primary mirror covered in gold, 24 feet across. It doesn't fit into the fairing, so it has these two side lobes, like ears, that are folded back.
The Webb telescope will be placed in the nose cone of the European Ariane rocket and will lift off from the coast of French Guiana in South America. It will take 29 days to get to its destination, making it too far for any repairs. The deployment of the telescope in space will be one of the most perilous ever attempted by NASA, and it will take several weeks before it is operational.
A new report on worldwide air pollution has found that Paris and Madrid have the highest rate of nitrogen dioxide. Medium-sized cities with high traffic congestion such as Naples also rated high on the scale. Krakow in Poland was also ranked highly, and joining me from there now is Victor Wachalowski. He is the CEO of Airly, which conducted this research on air pollution. Thank you for joining us, Victor.
Thank you for having me.
We have all heard about carbon emissions, but your study focuses on nitrogen dioxide. What's the difference?
Yeah, so we took into consideration like all major pollutants. So starting with particulate matter like PM2.5, PM10, and also gas pollution caused by cars and transport in cities. And we found out like very interesting stuff. So high concentrations of particulate matter PM10 in cities located in Balkan and Central Europe countries are the highest, and they are connected to the combustion of solid fuels for individual heating. So Krakow, Sofia, Bucharest, Zagreb, Belgrade, they all have an issue with air quality during the winter connected with the individual heating. When it comes to gas pollution, for example, nitrogen dioxide, we looked at like all cities in Europe, and it turned out that the highest in NO2 ranking places belong to both to the biggest cities in Europe, like Paris and Madrid, but also to the medium-sized cities with both unfavored topographic position and high traffic congestion, like Krakow, for example.
Air pollution blights our entire planet. What are its long-term impacts on health?
Yeah, so air pollution may be damaging every organ and virtually every cell in the human body, according to a comprehensive new global review. The research shows head-to-toe harm, from heart and lung disease to diabetes, dementia, and from liver problems and cancer to damaged skin. According to other research, like outdoor air pollution leads to 7 million premature deaths every year and costs 1% of global GDP. This is time to act. And we are talking about health implications and how like air pollution is decreasing average life expectancy, but we need to also think about economic implications, as air pollution costs 1% of global GDP as a result of sick days, medical bills, and reduced productivity. This is equivalent to over $300 per person worldwide. And I think this is really terrifying stat to share. So that's why we need to start acting to reduce air pollution globally.
He just doesn't want to move around while he's standing.
Mick Schumacher, the son of the famous Formula One driver Michael Schumacher, will follow in his father's footsteps and race for Ferrari next season. The 22-year-old German will act as Ferrari's reserve driver while racing full-time for Haas. This means that he could switch teams if the full-time Ferrari drivers Charles Leclerc or Carlos Sainz aren't available. Mick Schumacher will be available to stand in at 11 of the 23 scheduled races for next season, alternating with the other reserve driver, Antonio Giovinazzi. Mick's father, the legendary race car driver Michael Schumacher, won 72 races with Ferrari and is a 7-time Formula One world champion. He hasn't made any public appearances in over 8 years after suffering a serious brain injury due to a skiing accident. Little is known of Schumacher's current condition, his family keeping details under close wraps.
That's it for now, but do stay with us as we bring you all the latest from across Europe and beyond. And you can also find more on our website, euronews.com.